Hello, everybody. Welcome to our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher, and I'm here with my co-host, Janice Gillum-Grady. How you doing, Janice?
Good, Mark. Good day, everybody. Mark, today's interview that we're going to do is one that I've been trying to schedule for a long time, and I've looked forward to it because you know how we've been covering a lot of history. This one is a lot of history. We're talking back from 1954, and he's still going strong at 94 years old. And I remember his name from being a kid at St. Hill. I was the kid, but I remember hearing his name and so forth. And then even on the years on the ship, I would hear his name. So finally, we're going to get to talk to Antony Phillips. So this should be a very interesting one because he goes so far back.
Okay, great. That sounds good. Well, without further ado, here is Antony Phillips. Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, thanks. I'm located in Denmark, in the north suburb of Copenhagen.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
So are you anywhere near the Scientology advanced organization or any of that stuff?
It's 13 kilometers. That's in the center of Copenhagen. It's 13 kilometers in. I'm dead.
Yeah, that's what I hear. It's been pretty dead. But they also opened up an advanced organization in South Africa, which I assume has taken some of their clientele because it's much cheaper paying in rand than in euros.
Where are you from originally? And tell everybody how old you are.
Well, this body was born in the Isle of Wight in the south of England.
Okay.
So that's yeah. Yeah. But I've also got some past lives.
Right. Well, we'll stick to this one.
And you're 94 years old, right, Ant?
94, yes. It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, you mentioned to us you climb up 5 stories of stairs to get to your apartment.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's wonderful.
And you do that with your groceries?
There's a long history to it. One of the things I found was once about 10 years ago, I stood at the top of the stairs and I thought, well, this is a bit uncertain. So I thought, physiotherapy, go to a physiotherapist. So every morning since then, I've been doing a half an hour's exercise of physiotherapy. So you don't just get old beautifully by doing nothing. You have to create your survival.
That's right.
So yes, you do.
That's the motto, because that's the basic Scientology.
Right. Now let me ask you, Ant.
The cycle of action ends when you stop creating.
Right. Now, do you still audit people, or are you still receiving auditing?
I receive auditing once a week, yes. I'm beginning. I've audited someone on the Happiness Rundown about a year ago, and I'm just thinking when I would like to audit somebody. I've got a new rundown. I've process that, and there's a process which I've developed for looking at past lives. Because I have the theory, it's a theory, I suppose, but it's a certainty that when you get old, you key in earlier getting old. And I didn't want to go into this because
Oh, that's okay.
go into this because I'm more interested in what happened in the 50s.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, then let's just go right back to 1954.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you get involved with Scientology and where?
The story is that well, I was trained. I was a sort of apprentice to optician. In American, that's an optometrist. And I had two problems. One was I was threatened with the sack, with being dismissed because I was making mistakes. The other one was really well, it was a compulsion to grab the genitals of young boys. And I was living in Cambridge, which is 2 hours train journey from London. In Easter 1954, I went home to my parents in the south of London, and I told my father about this, and he got out an e-meter. I've given it to somebody in Germany now. It had a 24-volt battery in it, and he tried to do something, but he didn't get anywhere with it. So he sent me to a field auditor, and the name was Dennis O'Connell. That was in London, and I used to come into London from Norwich every Tuesday, every Thursday, for a course, a supplementary optician course, optometrist. And in the evenings, I went to this field auditor, Dennis O'Connell. And I think, looking back, it was very wise. I was in a horrible state. He ran 8C, an opening procedure by, what was it called? Tell me something you wouldn't mind forgetting.
Duplication. I'll probe by two.
Duplication. Tell me something you wouldn't mind forgetting. Tell me something you wouldn't mind remembering.
Okay.
And it wasn't opening procedure. No, yeah. But anyway, that was the command. And this went on for about a year. I got a job in London, but the auditor, Dennis O'Connell, said he thought I ought to get some training. So in 1965, in the spring, Ron held a conference, which I went to, and signed up for the HPA course, which is equivalent to an HCA, the Hubbard Professional Auditor. And that was in the evenings. And so that was the beginning of it.
So that course was at St.
Did you say 1955?
55, yeah.
Yeah, 55.
Yeah.
Can I ask you?
That was in London.
Yeah.
Ant, can I ask you? Did you read Dianetics? How did you even know about Scientology? When had you heard about L. Ron Hubbard?
My father.
Uh-huh.
I went to my father at Easter and told him this two problems I had.
Uh-huh.
He put me on an e-meter. He had a blind friend who he took to meetings. The meetings with they delved into mental phenomena, reading people's minds, sort of things. But this man, I've forgotten his name for the moment, but it's in the records. He asked my father if he would. This was a blind man. If he would take him to another thing, which was an interesting thing, and this was an introduction to Dianetics.
Okay.
So that was how my father found out about it.
Got it.
And Dennis O'Connell was the auditor. His wife audited my mother because my mother my mother was, I suppose you would say she was neurotic. She had insulin shock therapy, and therefore they wouldn't accept her at the HASI. So she went to this field auditor.
Okay.
So, but the interesting thing, okay. Ask me questions.
So then you said you wanted to get training. So in 1955, you did the HPA.
HPA, yes, yeah. And that was an that was an evening course. I used to travel up. I used to cycle up first from where I got a job near where I was living back with my parents. I cycled up to Notting Hill Gate, which is quite a long cycle ride, 3 nights a week for an HPA course, sort of thing. And
So that was at London Org?
that was in London Org, which was at another place. Notting Hill Gate is the area. Palace Gardens Terrace. I've forgotten the name, yeah. But anyway, it's in the records. And what happened there was the official HPA course was 8 weeks. So when I got, they said my evening course was 6 months. But then they decided that 6 months didn't equal 8 weeks of day course. The evening course was just 3 hours for three nights. So at the beginning of 1956, I switched over to the day course full time, and giving up my job and everything. And the interesting thing was there that I was twinned up with Pamela Kemp. Perhaps you know about Pam. And so I've had a sort of association with Pam and Ray Kemp along the way, in and out.
Well, I knew Pam because when she came to the Apollo, my roommate was on leave, and so Pam became my roommate for the short period she was on the ship. Yeah. So I got to know Pam pretty good and talked to her. And she talked to me about my mom and the old days in London, because she was like Mary Sue's best friend and Ray was like Hubbard's best friend. Oh, the two were always hanging out together in London, socializing together, the two couples.
Yeah, as a Ray Kemp was quite interesting. And I've had an on and off association with him and Pam also. But Ray was interesting in that, so far as I know, he never worked for Ron. He never got a paycheck for Ron. Everybody else became employed. But Ray was a nice independent bloke.
Well, he was a magician, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never seen any of that, but he was, yeah.
Yeah.
And can you tell our viewers, what was it like in 1955 and 56 in Scientology in London? I mean, were there a lot of people on course, or what was going on during that time period?
Yeah. What I remember to tell you was it worked like this, as far as I understood, that Ron spent half the year in London and half the year in the USA. So he would come over and be here or there. And what I remember a little bit was I remember there was some sort of a group, and I visited it when I got back to living in London.
That's okay. Well, let me ask you, now you brought up another question I have for you. When did you first meet L. Ron Hubbard? Was it there in London?
Well, yes, the first time I saw him was, of course, in London.
Yeah.
I did. I've never had any. Well, in London, I never had any association with him. When I worked at St. Hill, I can remember, I thought he was mad. I started working at St. Hill, and he walked past and said to me, "Welcome aboard." I thought he was I wasn't on his ship, but I haven't had much contact with him.
Did he do congresses or something in London or in the 50s? Is that when you saw him?
Yeah, there was a radiation congress. He got this book published, all about radiation, which is still available. And
Right.
I remember, and there was a lot of fuss about radiation. And when they had this radiation congress I went to, I can remember Herbie Parkhouse seemed to be keyed in thoroughly. And in a break, he lay down on the three chairs, sort of thing. But yeah.
What do you mean, Herbie would lay down on the three chairs?
Well, he was just re-stimulated, I suppose.
Okay.
It was just in the break. You know how chairs are laid out in rows.
Yeah. So Hubbard had been talking about radiation, and Herbie obviously keyed something in and went and laid down on three chairs.
Yeah,
I got it. Okay.
There was a lot of fuss about radiation, which you see in the book. It's all nobody thinks about it nowadays, or at least not in my sphere.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, those days it was close. The atomic bomb had gone off, and they were practicing all the bombing in Las Vegas out in the desert. And
yeah. Well, that we didn't have. That was the experimental bombs were in the USA, and they didn't affect Scientology in England.
Yeah. So how did you end up on staff at St. Hill, or did you join staff at London and then go to St. Hill?
Oh, we got this awful thing. Oh, yes, this dreadful thing. I was out of work, and I went, I was out of work for some reason, and I went to Hassey, London, and I started doing some work there, painting the stairs. And Jack Parkhouse was the association secretary, that's the head of the org there. And Jack Parkhouse had an office right down in the basement. That's just the floor below the ordinaries. There was only one basement. And he called me into his office and he said, there was another man, Barry Fairburn, had agreed to take over there was a miniature Scientology organization in Dublin. And the reason for that, as I understood it, was that Ron had had his visa cancelled, so he couldn't live in England. So he moved over to Dublin, to Ireland, which is a separate country. It was independent for about 50 years earlier. He built an org there. He got something going. And this rather fired me off, because I went to a congress. There's a place called the Commonwealth Hall. And in this congress, he talked about teaching by agreement. This is an important point. So somehow I got fired off with this teaching by agreement, and it was developed in Dublin, and they ran a course in Dublin, but they also ran a personal efficiency course in London on the London org, which used this teaching by agreement. You would ask the people you get the people. You need a group of about 5 or 10, and ask them for what does so and so mean. What does communication mean? You get an answer, and then you'd ask somebody else, do you agree with that? What do you think about that? You'll get communication going on, and you'll get an agreement of some sort, which would usually approach the Scientology agreement. But the point was that he was running this, he started this he started this organization in Dublin and left it. There was somebody called Bernie Green, an Irishman, had something to do with it. But somebody was running it, and Darrell Sykes, I think. No, I don't remember. And he needed replacement. And somebody called Barry Fairbairn was going to do it, but then he didn't want to leave his girlfriend. So, Jack Parkhouse was responsible for Dublin. So he called me in when I was painting the stairs and asked me if I'd do the job. And of course, I'd been longing to get a job in the Scientology organization. So here was my chance. And I can tell you it was hell. I wasn't fit for the job. I wasn't fit for the job by any means. And
now, what do you mean by it was hell?
Well, I landed with an I went over there.
Yeah.
And it's a at that time it was a sort of, well, you went by night, you went by a train and then took a bus, took a boat, and it was done at night and so forth. And the chap I met there, he met me at the pier and told me, I was told that I would be there for a week while he ran it, and then I would take over. But he said it was a week course. It went for 5 evenings. And you had a test in the first half hour and a test in the second half hour, and your IQ went up, and it was an OCA, which was similar to the APA. But anyway, I was landed there. It was dreadful. It was dreadful. I was landed there, and the staff was him or me full time, and a registrar in the evening, and an advanced course supervisor in the evening. The PE course was 5 days, 5 evenings.
Right.
It was a marvelous thing, but I wasn't up to it by any means. So I can remember very, very clearly that the first Monday, the man who should have grooved me in had gone, and I stood up there with about 20 to 30 people. I couldn't see them, and I sort of gave a lecture. It's interesting. It's interesting because here at the moment, or in the last 6 months, I've been running on an internet thing, chapters of Ruth Minshall's book, How to Choose Your People.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran into something there which I didn't know, suppressed emotions. And I found out that, a lot of my life I've been in suppressed fear. And I was, that was a condition when I took over management of an organization with 2 part-time staff. And the other thing was we used to have, it was set up in a funny way. They ran an article, they ran an advertisement in 2 newspapers, but we'd run out of money to pay for those. So the one newspaper refused, both newspapers refused to accept adverts from us, except cash in advance.
Right.
This was the state of the organization that I, Antony Phillips, was supposed to save. And anyway, the organization was run on this basis. Ran a free PE course and an advanced, so-called advanced course, which was 3 nights a week. I've forgotten. 3 nights a week on the tone scale, and 3 nights a week on.
I remember at that time period. Well, I don't remember it. I've heard of it years later because in '56, my dad was doing.
Oh, wait a minute. I can't remember the book, but of course it was TR 0 to 4.
Okay.
We used to have. We used to start with TR 1 and have a TR 5.
Communications.
TR 5 was a practice. It was,
right.
It was, I think, either mimicry or a two-way communication practicing thing. It's at a later date. It's interesting because at the time I was at St. Hill, they were developing TRs here in or there in London, sort of thing, and I sort of, because what happened to me was that I stuck this out for 6 months, from I think March to September, and they finally sent someone to relieve me. So when I came back, this was marvelous in its way. When I came back, I had a job waiting for me.
At London Org?
London Org, yes.
Okay.
Previously, I wanted to get on staff at London, but I couldn't. But here, I'd made a failure of Dublin, but I got it. The job, I started off in London Org. It was called shipping.
Okay.
Which didn't make any sense in England. It was an American term. But shipping was sending out the books and so forth. So I did shipping, memberships, and tapes. And there was a tape library at that time. They used to have 7-inch reels of tape, but they used to sell tapes on 3 3/4, which you had to turn over. So what they did was they sold one of these tapes, and every when the person had heard the lecture enough, he'd send it in, and I'd copy another lecture onto that, both sides of that tape. That was called a tape library, and I think they paid 3 shillings and sixpence. England hadn't gone over to decimals. We had pounds, shillings, and pence.
Right, right.
The other thing, of course, was that Dublin had or Ireland had broken away from Great Britain. So that this is going back longer, during the Second World War, I went to school, and we had a youngish Irish person, and he was able to teach us because he was exempt from national service. So we had at school, we had an old man who should have been retired, and another man who looked ill, and this Irish person. This was when I was at school. But when I was in Dublin, as I'm saying, the Irish pound was equivalent to an English pound, so that you could use English money in Dublin, but you couldn't
Right.
really get away with it with Irish money in England. But that's you better get me on the groove again.
Okay.
I can remember in the beginning, before I went to Dublin, there was dissatisfaction amongst the public because Ron was trying to make it a church. And a church was a Christian thing. It had nothing to do with Scientology. So there was
Right.
the English atmosphere with the introduction of a church was, well, I wouldn't say abhorrence, but it was bordering on abhorrence and mystifications. What do we have to do with the church?
Okay.
Now, how did you get to St. Hill? When did that happen?
Well, what happened was, first, I worked at London Org, and I got a job. I got various jobs in London Org, but I ended up. It was a bit silly. When I started, we were not on the unit system. We had, I think it was £8 a week, flat
Talk about
rate.
how you got paid. How you got paid,
Yeah.
right?
We got paid. Oh, that was also interesting because normally in England at that time, you were paid by the week, and you got a pay packet which were made up of notes and coins. But we were different. A check was sent to wherever Ron was. A check would be sent to the USA for each staff member.
Wow.
It was
That's
it was
yeah.
it was nutty. So every Friday we'd take 10 minutes off and go around to the bank and check and cash our paycheck for oh, this was another thing. This is where the unit system came in. This was another thing was we got a flat rate, and I was paid £8 a week. They held staff meetings occasionally, and one day Ron was going to come to the staff meeting. Oh, this is exciting! Oh, he never came to staff meetings. But the reason why he came to staff meeting was he wanted to get us all to vote for a unit system. So he came and promoted the unit system, and we agreed to this silly unit system. That reminds me of Pub's organ in Edinburgh. I've got so much history on my track.
Yeah. Well, we'll do several interviews and keep going until we get all this history out of you.
Okay.
But let's
Yeah.
explain, Janice. The unit system, if I'm not mistaken, is that like each position in the organization had so many units applied to it, and then whatever the total pay was would be divided by the units, so you'd have
Yes.
a value for one unit, and if you had 5 units, you got 5 times whatever that unit value was. Is that right?
Right. So if you were central files in charge, you might get 1 unit, but if you were the executive director, you might get 5 units. So you're getting 5 times more pay than central files.
Yeah, but I don't remember the details of it.
Right. But that's
And
just
it
a
also-
rough
All I
example.
can say is that yeah, that
Well, also it was based on how much money the organization made each week, and
Yeah.
that's how they would determine it. So
I
it
think-
was a way
Yeah.
of saving money,
Because
because if they had a
then-
set pay of £8 a week and the unit really is only 1, or 2 pounds. That's a way that Hubbard, I guess, worked it out to save some money.
I'll tell you something interesting. There was we had of course 5 or 8 or 10 staff auditors and a director of processing. Now, if you wanted auditing as a staff member, you paid the units of your auditor. So if it was a low unit week, this was a time to take a week off and get some auditing. And
so you could get auditing in exchange rather than getting your units. I get it.
I did get some. That's interesting. I did get two staff auditors, 2 weeks of staff auditing on that basis. The first one, my OCA or APA graph went up equally for everything, which means I just changed the valence, so they say, or something. The second one, the 5th London ACC and the 6th London ACC were concerned with past lives. There was something that came out in the USA. Somebody found out that in an earlier life they were Bridie Murphy. So Bridie Murphy hit the headlines. And
I don't know who that is.
No, Bridie Murphy was the person's name in their last life.
Oh, okay.
It was an American who had a last life in Ireland.
Oh, okay.
You can go to Wikipedia and look up Bridie Murphy. You get the whole.
Okay.
You get the whole story.
I will do that.
But the point was that I had this. I think it was fantastic. I had this staff auditing paid by units. And it was the period after I was also on the 6th London ACC, which ran past lives. But on this staff session, we found a past life, and it was a little boy in South Africa. I suppose I was about 5. It was most funny. And I've never found why, but I lived in a village where there were no other children. I was the only child, and I went out to play and fell asleep and woke up being eaten by a lion and a lioness.
Oh, that's like that little.
So we ran.
That's like that Sambo story.
So we ran this for 4 sessions, and then or 4 days. But the last day I came in for the session, and the incident had been on the wall, sort of thing. But it wasn't there. So they tried to. This is another thing. There was a stigma in the old days of being a black case. When I first came into Scientology, I was a black case. I couldn't mock up. So I couldn't do creative processing. And this was a big stigma and so forth. And because an earlier way of getting clear was the step 6 class. Yeah, you had to mock up all the way. But anyway, step 6 class, step 6 was a process you had to do to be clear. But I was doing it. I can't remember the sequence at the moment, but the thing I'm talking about, the session I got there, I think it was most the picture wasn't up on the wall anymore. So they tried all sorts of ways of getting me to mock up. And then I spent the end of the session, I don't know if you know about it, they did outdoor processing. You would go walk about and do spotting spots or...
Yeah, like a locational.
Yes, they put me back to location. And I walked
Right.
all the way to Richmond with my auditor doing this thing. This is, I don't know. This is just one of the things that happened in the old days.
Let me ask you a couple general questions. What was Ron like in London in the 1950s when you saw him? What was he like? Did you have interactions with him?
Well, yes, I can tell you one bit of interaction. That at one point, one of the things that happened was, as I say, I was down in suppressed fright. I was unhappy when I got there, when I started working there in London.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get in a muddle with the sequence, but when I started working in London, I was living with somebody in I think Notting Hill Gate, Highgate something, and I was very unhappy at weekends. So I asked him, "What should I do about it?" And I thought he'd say, "Get auditing or something," but he said, "Get a job." So I got a weekend HPA instructor training for the HPA course. So, in other words, I started in London doing memberships. So I had the membership record for the whole of USA and the whole of, the whole of the world, USA and Britain. And I we sent a magazine out also to the USA, and they sent their magazine Ability to us. So I was doing that, and I was doing books, sending books off, and I was doing this tape library thing. But I asked for a job at the weekend. So I got an HPA instructor at the weekend. So I started teaching the HPA course. And in that time, it was divided up into 3 units. You had a comm course. You had 2 weeks of comm course. You had 2 weeks of upper and dock course. 2 weeks of auditing. And then at the beginning, you had a week where you received a student auditing. And at the end, you had a week where you gave a student an auditing. So it was an 8-week course on the days. And at the weekends, 3 weekends, which was 6 days, not 5, was the same as, so we did a little bit extra the weekends. Now I've lost the thread.
Well, I was asking you, what was Hubbard like, and when you started telling the story. So was he involved?
I didn't see much of Hubbard. The one little incident I remember was that when he ran a course, an ACC, he ran ACCs in London. The staff went to hear him. The same happened at St. Hill, but this happened in London. And at one point, I became the director of training. In other words, I had a director post. What happened was that the person who was director of training wanted to go on to the ACC. So they hiked me up and made me director of training. But the story with Ron was my personal intercommunication with him, that he talked at an ACC lecture about HPA level people were what he used the expression wound up dolls. And I was offended because he mustn't call my students wound up dolls. Now we had also something that at that time he gave in the mornings, he gave about an hour's talk to the executives. And I had become an executive because I've been made DFT. So when I heard this thing about the, it's so mad. I was so annoyed with Ron that he would call my students wound up dolls. So I confronted him with that. This was very, very out of character for me. But I went up to him and said I didn't like him doing that, and he sort of acknowledged it in a friendly manner. It was sad. But that was the only contact.
What did he say?
He just acknowledged it. Yes, okay.
Oh.
And he didn't do it again.
He did. Well, no, but no. But I mean, it just happened in that lecture. What happened was that when I started in London, Jack Parkhouse was the director. They called it Association Secretary. At a later date, somebody called, an American came. I've forgotten his name. And then Herbie Parkhouse became Association Secretary. And I got moved to a job. Originally, there was an admin section for accounts and things. There was an auditing section, and there was a training section. And then they put me on to, because I'd done the PE in Dublin, they put me onto the department. This was a new department which ran a PE course and a HAS course. There was a new I don't, yeah, but they put me in charge of that, and and what happened was I was on a unit, and I said, I don't know, I got a bee in my bonnet that I wasn't getting paid enough units. So I went to Herbie Parkhouse and said I need some more units. And he wouldn't give them to me. So I left. And it was very silly. But anyway, I left, and I'd been teaching the HPA course for some time. The weekend HPA course lasted pretty long. So I got to know this. We used to go out to lunch with people. I mean, I used to eat at the same restaurant as the students. So I chummed up with some students, and two of them who lived out at Pinner, which was some way out of London, I moved in with them. Yes, right. Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah. I moved in with them And we tried, Christ, there's another bit I've missed, but we tried to run a group. And what happened there was that one of them found a pre-clear who had had electric shock, and she was impossible. And I tried to audit her, and it was impossible. But that group sort of, we didn't get anywhere. I did once give a lecture to something, but I mean, I wasn't up to it. I was still down there at suppressed fear. I used to go up from I lived with near this man I worked for, television man, in Clapham. And it's a short journey on the underground train. So I went up from Clapham to London Hazzie 3 nights a week and did this supervised course. And the supervised course was that you had a row of auditors, dummy auditors, and a row of pre-clears. And the supervisor would assess each person for a subject, and that person had to talk to the auditor on that subject. I was assessed on sex. And I think it was an 8 dynamic assessment. So I had a beautiful young lady, about 18 or 20, and I had to talk to this young lady about sex, and she just nodded. And this was the whole thing. It was fantastic. It was really fantastic. I can see you don't believe it, but you just answered, and the person nodded. They didn't do anything. And if they were used to call it the dummy auditor. If the dummy auditor felt he needed help, they just put their hand out behind them, and the auditor came along. But I think this was fantastic. I got so much charge off with regard to sex, so forth. Now, in the entrance to Hazzie, a notice went up. This answers your question. It said there was a vacancy at St. Hill. Now, St. Hill was the mecca of every Scientologist. And there was somebody offering a job. So I went and had an interview. This was, I've forgotten his name. He got disgraced afterwards. But I got an interview and got accepted. At the television shop, I got £8 a week, and I got £10 a week at St. Hill. So that's the story. You've got it now.
Was that Red Sharp?
What?
Was
Red
that
Sharp.
Red Sharp who you interviewed with?
No. He was a man who got disgraced. I've forgotten his name. It'll come up.
That's all right.
Yeah.
That's all right.
But Red Sharp was there because the point was when I went to St. Hill, there were less than 10 Scientologists on staff. The staff consisted of I think 3 course supervisors. This man who did the books, Ken Urquhart was there before me.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was a Scientologist, but he wasn't doing a Scientology job.
He was the butler.
He was a butler, yeah.
Yeah.
And there was a lady, when I went to work every morning, my job, I replaced a man, Joe Breeden.
Joe Breeden. Okay.
And there's two Joe. There's a Joe Breedon and Breeding.
Okay.
And they shouldn't be mixed, but I can't remember which one this one was. But anyway, he was a young fellow. The other Joe worked on e-meters, and
Right.
he did come to pubs all for a period. But I replaced this Joe, and my job was central files and address. And in the same office was a part-time typist, Joan Watson. Her name is, her initials JW is at the bottom of a lot of policy letters and bulletins. And every morning when I came in, there were handwritten, a pile of maybe this thick, written is by hand, by biro.
Right.
And you know what? He wrote the bulletins in red, and he wrote the policy letters in green.
Right.
And one day he picked the wrong
Colored pen.
wrong ball pen up. So she wrote it on the wrong color. So she had to redo them. But
Yeah,
anyway,
because those were the days when they had to type into stencils.
yeah.
And if you made a mistake, you had to use that little correction ink.
That's right.
Yeah. And then they printed it out in the red or the green ink.
They used the Romeo because you could change the color. The other thing is that we didn't do the things which were non-Mimeo were written on wax stencils, but the things which were Mimeo were written on plain paper, and we had a machine for making stencils from the plain, or a drum that rolled around. So she would send out stencils to, when it was a re-Mimeo, send out stencils to the main orgs, and 5 copies of the non-re-Mimeo.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, I forgot about that, Janice. They used to send out stencils to the orgs so that they could run the policy letters and the technical bulletins.
They could run as many as they wanted.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's because there were specific typists who could read Hubbard's writing. And if there was something they didn't understand, they would go to Hubbard and ask him, what's this word? Or is this correct? And you don't want that out in the orgs where they can't understand his writing. So they'd send out the stencils.
Yes, but at that time at St. Hill, the typist never went to Ron. Ron had gone to bed.
Oh, okay. On the ship they did.
Yeah. I can understand that. But somehow Joan Watson was very good. She came in the morning. She knew nothing about Scientology. It amazed me. So much pure theta went through, and she was oblivious of the meaning. She just got the words right.
Right. Well, there are those typists who don't even connect with what they're typing. They just sit there and type it.
Yeah, and she was that. She typed so fast. But anyway, that was it. And she came in every morning at the same time as I did, and then went at lunchtime. And she got it all done. So she was quite a person, but no interest in Scientology at all.
Well, that was like Hubbard's secretary at St. Hill later on, Irene Thrupp. She had no interest in Scientology.
No, Irene was at the same time.
Yeah.
I knew of Irene Thrupp, yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because that St. Hill was a mixed bag of Scientologists and non-Scientologists working.
And of course, there were gardeners So I think the non-Scientologists were about equal number to the Scientologists.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you one thing. It annoyed me wildly. At one point, for some reason, I got shoved into, I worked in the basement at St. Hill, and what happened was that I started off with Central Files and Addresso. But what happened was that I don't remember why, but I got a part-time franchise secretary, and I'd write to the franchise holder and so forth, and I got put into another room, which was mostly a junk room. And this is just to end off for today.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
In the corner of that room, suddenly Arthur would pop up and surprise me. He kept on doing that, and it was most annoying.
That's Arthur.
He'd be about
He was a young boy then, right? He was a young boy. Yeah.
He was young and very mischievous.
Yeah. So that's the joke.
Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Hit that like button. And then also, if you have any questions or comments, please go down below and write them down there, and we check them and we answer them all the time. If you'd like to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee. There's a link in the description. And that's basically what we have for this show. Janice, is there anything else you wanted to say before we end off?
No, I've enjoyed this, Ant. Thank you very much. And we'll schedule having you back to continue the stories. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I'm glad to be. I really think the early days should be remembered.
Yes.
And that's what we're trying to document is what happened in those days.
I think it's important, very important.
Yeah. Good.
Absolutely. So hold on a second. Don't go away. I'm going to play the end video. Until next time, everybody, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.